Welcome, listeners, to the latest episode of the AdQuick Advertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of technology, culture, marketing, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Danny Weisman. He is the Group Media Director at Noble People, an independent media agency based in New York City. Danny, welcome to the show.
Welcome. Chris had balloons flying as we started. That was amazing. We did peace at the same time. I'm pumped to be here. I'm pumped to talk to you guys.
He did, and I think that our listeners wouldn't have seen that on Spotify and Apple, etc. But I actually think that's an Apple thing that trumps and even sits in front of Zoom. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah, it's basically hard built into the
camera. Can I do this
like,
too?
I do the devil horns.
This is great. This is great for a podcast, right? Just like for people listening at home. Yeah, very cool.
And there was a case recently. Someone was doing something like fairly solemn, and it got recorded. I saw that where like it was one of the unintentional things of Apple's quirky UX is everything's silly, everything's like cartoony in the Apple world. They don't sometimes consider what the second order effects might be.
Good for Apple bringing some levity. It's a dark world.
There's no WTF gesture though, or thumbs down. So it is skewed towards the positive.
Yeah.
No, YouTube removed thumbs down. Reddit, which just went public this week, still has thumbs down. I think the thumbs down is actually pretty important. Like when I'm looking to do something online and I look through Reddit, like I'll want to see something where there's like, I'm trying to fix something in my house and there's like 200 thumbs down and like 5 thumbs up. I know that's bad. There's a plugin to get it back. So like that signal is useful.
Yeah. Wasn't Twitter screwing around with that too? They were like, Elon said he was going to do it.
Elon was going to remove stars and because they're not faves anymore, likes, I guess they're called, and retweets to remove those signals and just show impressions, which I don't think is good. I think like they're like in social, having some more cues as to what the crowd thinks is just helpful. So I'm not for that.
How are you going to dunk on people without knowing ratios? Ratios are the most fun.
Adam just brought up a ratio for his home improvement. He needed that ratio to do it. Yeah,
it's helpful. So, Danny, before we get into all of our wonky ad topics, do you want to give the 30-second or 60-second intro as to why we're listening to you? Chris and I already know you and like you, but for our audience, in your words.
Sure. Yeah, I'm Danny Weisman. I work in advertising. I work in marketing. Work in media planning. I work in Noble People, which is a creative media agency in New York. I know Adam gave the spiel at the start. I try to call things like it is. I post a lot on LinkedIn about different things that I see going on in marketing and media planning and things that don't smell right, smell a bit like bullshit. And I guess I cursed in the first couple of minutes, so that's my bad.
As long as it's not the
you're fine. Good.
Great. But yeah, I'm just eager to, I think LinkedIn's been a cool place because I've been able to share my thoughts and meet people like you guys, but also get different opinions and get a real community talking, because I think in marketing, especially in this world, we're talking so much BS, so many buzzwords, and also just about things in a way that just feel disingenuous. And I like just laying my thoughts out there, whether it be on my newsletter or on LinkedIn, to make sure that people just hear a different perspective or maybe something they're not thinking about. So, I'm pumped to talk to you guys about some of those topics, but, I think we all get caught up in some of the day-to-day stuff and just want to break free from that sometimes.
We love it. So we'll start by asking you a really easy one. This is something we've seen you talk about in a few places. You've said before that, and I'm quoting, ad-supported video is effed.
We can say that now.
We can say it now. It's fine. It's fine. But so do you want to just expand on, because this is from last year, do you still believe this? What does that mean exactly? How should agency people and brand people be thinking about this?
Yeah, it's a great topic. I'm actually working on something right now. I'm writing something up, which is the expansion I'll give on the topic is this, which is, I think by the end of 2025, it's going to be a must for any video buying team to buy Netflix, Amazon, and Walmart as part of their video mix. And I say that because I do think the ad-supported streaming or ad-supported video landscape in general has been challenged, whether it be linear TV, whether it be streaming TV. It's all been kind of fucked. And I think I can say it now. Chris said I could say it now. So I'm
we're more than 3 minutes in.
No fine from these guys. So I think the linear is the obvious one. I think linear is at a point where it's getting shit on so much that it's a little underrated. The thing I like to say about linear is, yes, I understand that cable households are declining. I think it's under 50% now. Time spent with cable. Michael Beach has a great newsletter, State of the Screens, put out a stat that time spent with cable is decreasing at 2 times the rate as linear or cable homes are decreasing, which means that even if you have cable in your home, you're actually spending time with it less. So just being a subscriber to cable is not helpful as you think about the reach of that environment. But what I think is interesting about linear TV is we say it's declining. We say TV is going to die, but then at the same time, we're saying, all right, this women's sports game got 3 million viewers. So women's sports is having a moment. And that doesn't make sense to me because we're using TV as a benchmark for like excellence and reach, but then we're saying it's dying. So I think TV at this point, I think is a almost getting underrated, but still very challenged when it comes to cable households declining and time spent declining. Then you get to ad-supported streaming. And even now, the landscape has been dominated by B players. You know what I mean? Like you got Pluto TV, you got Roku. I've never met anyone in my life who was like, I love Pluto TV. Like I thought, like that's my jam. Like that's what I watch. Tubi's having a moment now, but I think that has more to do with brand marketing and their really strong marketing campaigns and getting people on the platform than it really does about their content library. So, whether it's Peacock or Paramount Plus or Max, like all the ad-supported space, agencies would be like to their clients, hey, all these people are watching connected TV and streaming TV, and you could look at the hours. eMarketer came out with a report today. It was like people spend more than 4 hours watching digital video, which is great. But a lot of those environments are not ad-supported. Netflix for a long time was not ad-supported. Amazon Prime until this January was not ad-supported other than Thursday Night Football. Disney Plus for a long time did not have ads. So I think now you're starting to see the explosion of connected TV premium content. Netflix is obviously getting on board. That service will scale. Amazon Prime now has ads. Walmart is in talks to buy Vizio. So you're going to start to see like a much more mature space. But I just worry that we've just pushed so many ad dollars to the Fubo TVs of the world, to the Pluto TVs of the world on behalf of our clients, and they're reaching nobodies. And that's what I think.
One question for you. At the beginning, you said in 2025, you think that there's going to be 3 essentials. It was Walmart, Amazon, and Netflix. Why? Why do you think so?
Yeah, so I think it'll take a little bit of time to scale. I think Netflix is in the hunt a little bit for like more sports rights. I don't know if they'll like net out with an NBA package, but there were reports yesterday that they might get the in-season tournament, that they can get a NBA playoff game. But I think they need time to scale the ad service. It's only at, I think, 20 million global users or MAUs. And I think they need like a Squid Game type moment or the next season of Stranger Things to bring in all the people that have been locked out from the password crackdowns. And that probably will take about 18 months to happen. But when it does happen, I do anticipate more advertisers getting on board. I do think that they're more eager to cut deals with brands. I think they're getting off their pedestal from the $50, $60 CPMs, and they're more inclined to get people testing the platform. Amazon Prime, I think similarly in that sports realm, we'll see what happens with them and NBA rights, as well as like the local rights. They just took a stake or talking to take a stake in Diamond Sports. But obviously Amazon is a really, really great place, not only to eventually advertise, but has some of the best shopping signals in the world, right? So if you want to do closed loop analytics, if you want to do shoppable TV, that has a lot of promise on the Amazon platform and as Amazon Prime. And I see Walmart in that same environment too. If they can really make Vizio a part of their ad ecosystem in a strong way. And we'll see what kind of inventory Vizio unlocks for them, because it might not be that premium. But I think it'll just take a little bit of time for those platforms to scale. But when it does, I think it could be really promising.
So, okay, that makes sense. You had mentioned that, there's a kind of tiered structure to how people perceive streaming services. You'd mentioned some B players, so on and so forth. I would expect consolidation just based on business knowledge of being in the game for 15 years. But where does Disney, Fox, and like Warner kind of fit into this equation? Because aren't they teaming up for something?
Yeah,
that's fairly recent.
Chris, you seem like a Pluto guy, man. You seem upset that I came after.
Oh no, I'm a YouTube guy. I'm YouTube and HBO.
So it's a good question. So when that news broke, and I've seen, like, who am I? Who am I but a mere mortal in this marketing world? But I'd like to say I've gotten some things wrong. I've gotten some things right. And when that news first broke, the first thing I said was, if Warner, I think it's Warner, Fox, and Disney, right? Or Warner, are teaming up for the sports streaming service, and they're going to charge people $40 to $50 a month, then why would someone who has YouTube TV downgrade from just $70 a month to have that sports package for $50 a month? It doesn't make sense. Who is that service really for? I think Disney is low-key struggling when it comes to streaming right now. Nielsen just put out their latest gauge report, which does viewership for the different streaming services, as well as the TV ecosystem at large. Hulu has actually been low-key declining for the last couple of months. Some of that might have to be because of the writer strike, and fresh content isn't on Hulu right now. I know Shogun is on Hulu, which I just started the other day. It's so fun. Are you guys watching this show? Are you watching Shogun?
Shogun's good, but it requires your full attention. Like, obviously you can't do it in the background because they're all speaking in Japanese.
So it's funny because like someone to me was like, "Oh, this is like Game of Thrones meets Succession," and I was like, "Wasn't Game of Thrones like Succession? Like, why does it have? You know what I mean? Like, it was still the same, but whatever. That's like an aside for another day." But yeah, so Hulu, if you look at the numbers on Nielsen, has been declining since last year. I think it was 2.8% of TV time spent in February. It was in like the 3 to 3.5% range last year. And also, Peacock took a lot of their titles off of Hulu over the last year to, and I think it's things like Saturday Night Live and the reality programming. So a lot of that has migrated to Peacock, and Peacock is low key jostling with Hulu in that same kind of realm. Disney Plus's streaming numbers aren't great. It's under 2%. So about 1.9% of TV time spent in February was on Disney Plus. Tubi was at 1.7%, not too far away. I think Max was at 1.4%. So I do think Disney is going to have to make some ground in getting that viewership back on track. And then I think Warner is just, it's a shame. I think that's a good case study in, we've all grown up with HBO.
Yeah.
I don't think I would ever watch ads in front of HBO content, like ever. And I just think that's user behavior. And that's what they're banking their streaming service on. I know it has Discovery Plus content. I know it has animation, but so many of those originals, I just don't really see how you can convince people to be receptive to ads or want to pay for ads for content that they usually or didn't get, which I know is talking out of both sides of my mouth a little bit because I'm, that's whole Netflix's business model coming up. But I just feel like it's going to continue to struggle if they're only coming out with big shows every once in a while. So,
yeah, a few weeks ago, I think the guys on the All In Pod shared the churn rates for some of these some of these services, and some of them are just not sustainable. So I imagine you'll start to see consolidation in the space.
There's that stupid meme that like someone will do this and it will go viral like once a week where they'll list out the cost of all of the streaming services in one window and then they'll put the cost of cable in the other, and they'll be like, oh, we've recreated cable, and I'm someone sitting over here and I'm always scratching my head. I'm like, who pays for every freaking service? Like, I just pay for YouTube and Netflix, and I just don't have anything else. Like, where's it mandated you have to buy everything?
Yeah, it's so I have two thoughts on this. The first thing you said, Chris, about the churn rates in general. When for marketers, for media buyers, I think that's going to be really important because it's going to be really hard to predict what the audience is on a streaming service month to month that you want to target.
Right.
But that could be a strategy. So for example, if I'm going to run on Netflix in the month that Stranger Things is coming out, maybe I'm reaching a wider audience or more comic book fans versus another month where I'm reaching this kind of audience, a Bridgerton audience, which maybe is more female focused. So I do think that could be a strategy that comes into play a little bit. Mm-hmm. On the cost thing, something I think about all the time is why Spotify doesn't raise their prices higher. Like it blows my mind. Like all these streaming services are charging like 15, 20, 25 bucks a month. Like I'd pay 20 bucks a month for Spotify.
Musicians must starve.
Exactly.
Hey, I say this as someone who writes music and makes a rounding error of money from the streaming service.
But I can't imagine ads in my ears. Like we used to say this to clients, and then I had to stop because I'm like I couldn't sell Spotify anymore, like to clients, because I was like, why would I want to target someone who won't pay $8.99 for Spotify? And maybe that's like a biased point of view or whatever it is. But I feel like music is the one thing that I could wrap my head around that you would never want to hear ads.
I actually really like the native ads where Joe Rogan will read an ad to me. I'm like, so there's something soothing about it. Like, I'm like, okay,
podcasts
Joe.
are different. Podcasts are different.
AGI, baby.
I think the podcasts are different. I think
AG1.
music though in the stream of a playlist is just like such a buzzkill. Like you're in a groove, you're running, you're working, and then it's like this has been brought to you by like, no, get out of here.
As a side note, did you guys see the Andrew Huberman story this week?
Yeah, I'm not as well. I saw the tweets.
AG1 had the opportunity to do the greatest real-time marketing ever. I don't think they did anything because we would have seen it. But I mean, it's basically bullish for AG1 saying, look, 50-year-old guy able to do all of this. It's the AG1. It would have been like one of the best pieces of real-time marketing ever. I think they're too shy because he's a sponsor. I don't think they could do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I was hoping you could shed some light on one more thing for us here. So when we're talking, I was reading your posts about the consolidation of the streaming spaces and your takes on those. But there was one line that really stood out to me, and it was just so exceptionally written. It was like, products are created for advertisers over customers. Can you unpack that for us a little bit?
Yeah, I love this. This is like you guys are petty. I needed this after this was a long week. I mean, like a lot of things were getting me down, and like you're like, that was an awesome line. I'm like, let's go. I think that product, I think it was about Spulu, that one in particular, or the streaming sports service. I think that a lot of media companies dress things up as if they're the next hot thing because they know that they need someone to buy it and pay the bills. And I think when it comes to up and coming sports, when it comes to new services, when it comes to new podcasts, we get pitched stuff all the time. This is a first to market opportunity. Yeah. First to market opportunity means no audience. Like literally, like it means nothing. It like, why would I want to be the first to market with this? Budgets are already so challenged and so slim that I know the other side of the coin is it's cluttered and you can't stand out, but a lot of times these companies have to make sure that they're appearing fresh to the marketplace. So they want to sell new things and get a title sponsor on something different, but then you're wasting money on small things. And I think the media companies have to do that because they have to appear fresh to the marketplace. They have to appear innovative, and they have to also coax dollars where they couldn't get it before. In the case of this one, if the TV networks are seeing that their revenue is less and less, they have to create new products that attract advertisers, but the scale just can't be there from the get-go. It's just not possible. So it's almost like a lifeblood for these companies, but it just doesn't mean meaningful things to advertisers who sign on.
Thanks for that. That's never really thought about it that way. And I mean, we're in an industry where there's a new media format, the new fortune cookies, the new pizza box ads, the new drones in the sky.
I'm going to start doing that. I think I'm going to start going like, look, second to market, and that's awesome. We're going to be second. It's going to be sick because we've already had the losers prove out that all the pitfalls of this thing. We're going to be able to take it back from them and do it better. What were you saying about fortune cookies and drones, though? I was curious.
Oh yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of every year we onboard hundreds of new media partners for the supply side of our marketplace. And there's always all these new and tested ones. And, it's hard to kind of ascertain the CPMs on it and how many people are actually seeing them. But also, it's just a novel way of getting discovered. And
what do you guys think about fortune cookies? I'm genuinely curious.
I don't order a whole lot of Chinese food, but I imagine that folks that order Chinese food, it's a great way to reach them.
Adam gave a thumbs up.
I like fortune cookies.
I just saw Elon showcase a fortune cookie little fortune on Twitter like 2 days ago.
I have my good luck cat on my desk that came from Japan. So
it's funny because so at our agency we're constantly trying to think of cool and interesting ways to show up in the world, and fortune cookies come up a bunch, and and we have a great outdoor team, and we've done stuff with decals and billfold stuff and stuff like that. But fortune cookies, I always want to. I want to do specifically, we'll find a brand. I want to do a fortune cookie idea on Christmas, and we're going to reach a lot of people,
Oh yeah.
If you did a fortune cookie campaign that was clever and there weren't thousands of people taking photos and posting to Instagram, it would actually be really hard to mess that up. You'd have to like try hard because everyone takes a photo of their fortune cookie. It's like such a great way.
100%.
Chris and I talk about this a lot. Like out of home is the easy vector into the internet if you do cool things. Now you have to do cool things. You can't just, put a message up and pray. But anyway, Danny, so we have a whole bunch of questions for you. Another thing you've talked about that I thought was super cool, especially as a Jewish person, I laughed at this. You said, let's talk about the media pork problem. Do you want to share what that is? Because that was like, that was pretty fun for me to read through that. I like that analogy.
Dude, I read a lot of stuff. Remind me what that was, the pork thing?
You were talking about pork. You were reading a story in the Wall Street Journal, I guess. You were talking about pork overproduction. And so you likened that to the fact that, we're talking about all these, you're talking about being first for a new media format, but there's already so many media formats and ways to reach people that advertisers have kind of the same pork problem of maybe a little bit of an oversupply in terms of, media choices of where they can actually target their users.
I think that, so I'll my philosophy on just like in general with this stuff is default to interesting. Like that is my philosophy. So you could twist yourself up in a pretzel trying to make decisions when it comes to like media partners and media plans. I think things come down to reach, attention, and cost. Like, is this reaching enough people? Is it reaching the right people? Are we capturing their attention? Is this like a terrible ad experience? Like you guys were saying, are we just putting something on a wall that everyone's going to pass by? Are we doing it in an interesting way? And are we doing it for an efficient rate? And I think the reason why Facebook, YouTube, and TV for a long time commanded so much ad dollars is they check all those boxes. If I'm doing a YouTube media buy, I know I'm getting the reach. I know I can pay on a 30-second mark and it's going to be pretty cheap. And I can do that over and over and over again. TV, aside from like broadcast sports, like cable TV, like cheap CPMs, high reach, attention, iffy, whatever. But when it starts like going down the line, I want to default to interesting. I want to take that cool out of home idea over being a display banner on the side of a random website. Or I want to be a full podcast takeover and really own that experience. Like, I think AG1 does a good job of that. And like other brands do a good job of that versus being one out of fucking 8 podcast advertisers and there's some programmatic reads or whatever. So I think in general, all brands need to really start prioritizing how they show up because there are so many brands that don't. And it's so painfully obvious and annoying, not even as a marketer, as a consumer, when I'm listening to shows and just knowing so many dollars are wasted along the way because people are fragmenting their media choices, when the reality is people only really gravitate to a handful of channels to begin with. Everyone's on Instagram. Everyone's on TikTok. It's just true. Everyone's on YouTube. Everyone's walking out and about their cities, seeing out-of-home ads. You don't have to really get so precise on it. But it is important to show up in an interesting way. And I think that's where people can make better decisions.
I love it.
And all the terminally online people are on X.
100%. We did an X campaign. I was pretty optimistic when Elon bought X. Like I really was as a marketer. I was like, yo, this could be awesome. Like we could get some real innovation, real different types of units. Ran an X campaign for a client. It was a disaster. Just like an epic disaster. Like so many trolls, so many comments. The traffic to the site was so shoddy. So I hope I don't get canceled on X for saying these things. But I was pretty optimistic when he bought it. But now it's just like I'm not sure.
Yeah, I don't think X has ever, under current or previous management, had great ad products. I've always been scratched my head why they didn't steal a few senior people, pay whatever it took to get them from Facebook or Google to build the ad targeting machine to be done right. Because I don't think they built it. And then the other problem with, I think as you get to a more pure social media play like X and Reddit and down the line to things you can't advertise on, like even 4chan, just the harder it is to run ads. It's like the communities, they don't really want ads in that way. They'll discuss brands, but they don't necessarily want things pushed in front of them. I've seen it done really well, and I've seen it done horribly, but I think on like the net, it's just, there's something about those sites that just, they don't like advertisers.
So I agree with you. We've run campaigns in the past on those types of platforms, and what we always find is they prefer to stay on the platform versus click out to a brand site. They want to stay in their conversations. They want to stay with their communities. And it like, you know, I've written about this for Reddit in the past, where like Reddit has really leaned into auction-based advertising, performance advertising. And that makes sense. You have to. If you're about to become a public company, you have to get a recurring revenue engine on your side to tell investors, like, this is our game plan and this is what's recurring. We don't just have these like one-off brand campaigns or these one-off activations. But I wish that Reddit could have went farther into brand, went farther into weird, went farther into like, hey, we got an interesting activation, we need to go to Reddit. I think Twitter should have done that too. Twitter's a bit different because you're so scrolling through the feed so much. It's less community based than it is just keeping up with topics. But we've had some cool ideas for Reddit in the past. They've been great partners to us on certain campaigns, but I wish they would have went even further into like weird and brand versus performance.
Yeah, and to also add, just because you can't advertise somewhere doesn't mean you can't do really well marketing there. So
100%.
Of course, you know, if your marketing team isn't doing a good job in organic social, in addition to the ad team, you're really only doing like a fraction of your work.
100%. 100%.
So I want to ask you about that as well. Chris has written a few op-eds over the last year on the state of the CMO. And I think we've all seen examples of CMOs that we look up to that do amazing work. Like, you know, I'd say like the Blizzard campaign with Diablo for their launch was just like great work. And then we see examples of companies and brands we won't name where they've created basically a national PR crisis for themselves by doing things that you and I would be scratching our heads, wondered how that was approved. I'm curious your take, as broad or as narrow you want to get, on the state of the CMO, and maybe like a message or two. We do have a bunch of CMOs that listen to us, how they can think about things in the coming years from where you sit.
Yeah, Mark Ritson wrote a great piece about this like a month ago, and basically said like, at the end of the CMO is complete bullshit. Like, there's going to be CMOs. It's an important position. It just, you know, don't take it a couple companies and what they do with that position. I think it was a Wayfair. It was like one of those companies. They were like, we're going to get rid of this position. Great. I think from my experience, I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. Actually, yesterday I was listening to a podcast. Do you guys know the On Strategy Showcase podcast? Whatever. It's always good to advertise another podcast when you're on a podcast, right? Never mind. It's whatever. Listening to this podcast, and it was the CMO of Yeti, and he was talking about their brand and talking about all the work that they do. And he basically said up front, like, I got to, because the host was like, how do you get to make such films? And he's like, I don't know, honestly. I don't know. Like, I just like, it's not based on like ROI, because if it was, it'd be terrible. It's just based on the trust I have from the CEO. And I was like, okay, wow, that was a huge unlock. I was going to write a LinkedIn post about this, but I'm starting to think that if you get a brand budget, it comes down to two things. It either comes down to how your business is performing or has performed. Like the, you know, when we were in a zero interest rate environment, a lot more people had brand budgets because they had more investors or they had more investment. They wanted to have market penetration. So it's either about current business performance or how revered your CMO is and how much trust that CMO has within your organization. So the more that CMOs can just foster that trust, and that trust could be based on a track record of experience. You've done baller stuff before, and you could just like bring that to the table and be like, look, you want to argue with me? I did this Nike campaign 5 years ago and we grew the business by 10 times. Or you want to argue with me? Or, you know, you could do that whole thing. I think a big thing, I think Mark Ritson said this, but we've done this with our own clients, is making the board or the finance team or the CEO envious of the competition. So what we do a lot is like, oh, you're not going to spend 20 million on this ad campaign. Well, your competitor spent 80 last year. Or this brand that you admire, they spent 100 last year. And they did it in these channels. And he said it, but we say it too, that those arguments are always better than like the rough theory. Than the, oh, you know, the research says you should do this. Yeah, research says a lot of things, but research can't, you know, pay the bills. But if you can see that your main competitor just tripled their ad budget and is prioritizing these channels, it makes people perk up a little bit more. So I think those two things definitely in particular, definitely make sure that you show your experience and make sure that you're like keeping an eye on the competition and then pointing out to others when the competition does stuff. So yeah, it's tough, but I think all in all, I think those two things are really important. It can be just as important as tracking everything down to a T and making the finance team comfortable with the numbers, because people are also emotional and they're envious and they want to be better than the competition.
Yeah, I also had a quote from you that I'm going to quote yourself back to you, that you said, I think I got this right. The biggest case for brand marketing as a business vehicle is that aligns with what Wall Street cares about most,
Yes.
which is future growth. And Chris and I were talking about that, and we're like, Danny gets it. I mean, can you even think of a large American company that doesn't invest in brand? Like, can you imagine going to like, you know, a Coke or a Nike team and saying, guys, brand doesn't matter, right? It's just unbelievable that there are even people in the marketing industry who are just like, you know, down funnel performance marketers and don't think about brand.
Yeah, our CMO once said this to me, and I believe it. But like, marketing is a little bit like different religions, like different religious sects. Like, you have the performance people, and they're like the cultish performance people, and I need my ROI, I need my ROI. And then you have the brand advocates, and I think that's true. I think yes, I 100% think it's crazy that we put earnings and Wall Street and stock prices on such a pedestal, and that is based on future growth. But we can't do that for our marketing. And I think what's even more illuminating is the Coke example. I once had a client a couple of years ago be like, yeah, well, if Coke turned off advertising, they wouldn't feel it. So why do they even need to advertise anymore? I'm like, yeah, because they did for 50 years and they still need to, you know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like it just came out of thin air that they became popular. But I actually think you look at the recent examples. So Airbnb, I think, is a huge case study in flipping the switch from performance to brand and seeing their business continue to accelerate after flipping that switch. And they've become, I think, some of the best brand marketers in the game right now for their out-of-home advertising, for their video advertising. I think there were other D2C brands also that have really flipped the switch in an interesting way. But I'm even more encouraged by those recent brands that are making moves from a brand perspective and seeing growth from that, because that means that, you know, it's still a playbook that can be emulated today.
Yeah, I think as a lot of the startups have matured, like you even see long form brands from things like Uber, where if you were to talk to the early guys, they're all growth hacker types and would have like laughed in your face. But I think there's something to the company size where you get to a certain scale and it's almost like it's almost like you're lowering your own value if you only did, you know, buy now ads instead of having anything aspirational. And it becomes even more true if you want pricing power, because really brand is the only reason that I would pay a premium for a Coke over an RC Cola, right? Yeah. It's the same product, but it makes I tell a different story to myself when I pay for it, right?
I think where brand gets a bad rap is because it's expensive, and that's just like the nuts and bolts of it. Like, it's easy to fuck up on Facebook. It's hard to fuck up on brand. And I think a lot of people confuse just bad campaigns for bad brand campaigns, because it's such a big investment when you screw it up, or when it takes multiple years to see that return. But sometimes it is screwed up, and I don't want to be disingenuous with that too. And some people get PTSD, whether they had a bad campaign or bad creative or a shitty, God forbid, a shitty media plan. But I do think that the expensiveness of it makes it a hard pill to swallow, especially when you have marketers in their jobs that have annual bonuses, you know, that are only going to be there for 2 years. So how can you be planning for the next 5 to 10 years? That is the biggest problem, I think, that we have sometimes in this industry, which is like this cover your ass mentality.
Duration mismatch.
Yeah, 100%. And I said this a couple years ago, which was, well, now I'm thinking about my past stories, which was, if you go back to 2022, I think it was, Bing increased their like ad revenue by like 50% or something crazy. And this was before AI. This is before ChatGPT. This had nothing to do with that. And I was like, what the fuck, Bing? Like, why is Bing increasing their ad revenue by 50, whatever the number was? It was a big number. Like, they were at 8 billion in ad revenue. And I go, oh, because we're in another recession. And this has nothing to do with user engagement. This has nothing to do with people using Bing more. It has everything to do with marketers wanting to cover their own asses, pump more money into search, and Google gets some of it, but Bing also gets some of it too. So the ad revenue had nothing to do with people searching more on Bing. It had everything to do with marketers wanting to cover their own asses more, and Bing being the fallout from that. And I just think that's such a problem, because how can you plan for the long term if people just aren't in it for the long term? And I think I always try to take the long-term perspective with our clients. It's hard sometimes because you are having to make sacrifices and trade-offs, and it's their money and you want to be the best steward of that money. But I also don't want to see the company make bad choices in the short term and the long term.
Yeah, I think that there's a perpetual problem in marketing of poor expectations management, which goes along with what you and Chris were saying about, wanting to invest. And I think that the been there, done that, people understand that brand marketing does have a compounding effect like finance. You need to spend a lot of effort, and not even just all financial effort, a lot of creative effort to figure out, what the messages are, how you want to share them. And it takes time to actually make that investment in the market. By the way, Bing's a great example because I think you mentioned this, they make like $8 billion a year. Like, a lot of people don't know how much money Bing actually makes, which is crazy.
It's insane.
Search is a profitable business model.
I dream of that number.
Who wouldn't? I think so something you said though, I want to double click on, which is Jesus Christ. But the expectation setting, because we talk about that a lot with our clients. We work with a lot of challenger brands. We work with a lot of up and comers within their respective industries. And there's a lot of debate usually on our side of like, well, we really have to set expectations with the client that this budget, won't achieve this goal. And what I like to remind people on my side is, yeah, look, if they had enough money, I don't know if they would have picked us to work with us. Like they want that fresh answer. They want that unexpected answer. They want, whether they know it or not, they want that moonshot. And I think it's our job to like kind of give them that scenario and make sure. I read this book by Adam Morgan once. It was called Eat the Big Fish. And I think he has like an agency called that. And one of the things he said was, it's not awareness, it's enthusiastic preference. And it sounded like bullshit at the time, but I think it's important to just understand there's never enough money. There just never is. I've never worked on a project where I was like, oh my God, it's enough. Oh my God, we have the perfect amount. And now we're going to reach our goals. Like, no, like it's never enough money. It's never the right time. It's our job to do something interesting with that money and make it fresh and make it interesting, and set the client's expectation too of like, this is a stretch scenario, or this is like, hey, based on like your goals, like we do kind of have to shoot for the stars. Like we could like whatever, but I don't like sometimes in marketing in general, when we back down from a challenge. Let's set the expectations that it is a challenge, but let's blow it out of the water, or at least try to.
Yeah. One of the things that you could say the converse too, which is in the ZIRP years, zero interest rate phenomenon for those listening, basically from the financial collapse, I would argue that marketers had too much money, right? And you had money flowing into ideas that underperformed or didn't perform at all, or no measurement parameters were set to even dictate or understand how it was measured. So,
yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And I think that got a lot of marketers sloppy, right? Because you didn't have to account for things as much. You didn't have to defend things as much. And I do think COVID was tough because a lot of those brands obviously didn't have as much money to throw around. Yeah. And now I think are still a little shell-shocked from the possibility of having a rough couple of years, and they're less willing to try new things. And I think those cobwebs are starting to shake off this year. I'm seeing it. But it definitely was like a rough couple of years where like I said, the default nature was going to social and search and things we've done already. And now it's definitely become more of like, okay, how do we might not have as much money from before, but we might have a little bit more. And so what's the best way to allocate those funds?
Yeah, I think a lot of marketers are discovering that new normal. I mean, we experienced insane growth during the ZIRP years because obviously there was a lot of hot money flowing into the venture-backed startup sector. And we put up numbers that most people would dream of, like 4.5x in a year.
Yeah.
But that's obviously not sustainable. And we had to like recalibrate our approach. Obviously, I was spending a lot more on performance in those years than we do today. And having Adam as an addition to have that brand air cover has been tremendous for our business, because I would argue that the quality of, we're B2B, right? So the quality of our leads, you could tell that the brand is bringing in better quality, more upmarket leads with larger budgets. So
yeah,
it's important for B2B companies to invest in brand as well.
We work with a ton of B2B brands, and I think, there's been a lot of good research too over the years on B2B brand building. I actually think I've seen my B2B clients take bigger leaps or want to take bigger leaps than some of my B2C clients, because they know it is an emotional decision, right? Like at the end of the day, when you're making a B2B decision, like it's your job, it's your reputation, and you're not going to go with someone that you don't know about. Obviously, you don't think fondly of, you don't think is a leader in their space. And I think that makes it a really cool challenge to make sure like you're always spreading the love, spreading the awareness when you're working on a brand like that.
Yeah, there's one ad that I always bring up, and it's from the 50s. It's like McGraw-Hill. It's the old man in the chair.
Sure.
And basically brand is answers a lot of questions that, you know, buying committees have up front, which is like, what's your company's record? Its reputation. What do you want to sell me? Like, you know, all the basics, and brand solves that. Even for B2B, it's a lot easier. It's like, hey, we do this. I mean, we saw CrowdStrike do it during the Super Bowl. I thought that was pretty smart. Like, hey, we protect from intrusions on your web properties.
That's that's an ex-client of ours. They do cool stuff. I was trying to think too, like, because I was just talking to our president. We have a new president. His name's Barry Dan, and we were talking about what's the classic problem that some of these brands have to solve for. And B2B, at least some of the B2B brands we work with, and maybe you guys can relate to this, is like proving that you're like legit, right? Like that. I think that is like a big challenge when it comes to like up and coming like B2B startups and brands. And like some of that's the company you keep, right? Like you got to be on CNBC just to say like, yo, I'm a real brand. I got to be on an out-of-home board just to say I'm a real brand. And I think that 100% comes into play with modern B2B brands. And I think the channel mix is changing in terms of how people engage with different B2B brands, but I think that's huge. And that comes back to before, like, I hate when we talk about things like awareness and consideration. Like, what's the real challenge? The real challenge is someone doesn't think we're legitimate. Great. Let's talk about that. Let's label it. Let's make that the KPI or challenge versus something bullshit.
Love it. Yeah. Adam, you want to take the next one?
I tend to find out about B2B brands from, you know, bloggers and people who post online, like both of you. And then I don't, if they spend a lot of money on a Super Bowl ad, that's signaling to me they're probably not going away. But after all the crypto stuff, who knows? But more than anything else, I actually look to see that, like Aaron Levy, who runs Box, right? He's updating the internet every day, talking to people. I'm like, is the team like online and responsive? And if they are, I know I'm going to get good service from the rest of the team. So that's something that I've used as like a sorting signal for myself. And I think I've only bought pretty good software. Like even the StreamYard team, we're using their software now. Like there are people on social respond right away. I'm like, great, these guys are going to help me. And so, I mean, that's just like one other signal I use. Because sometimes for some pieces of software, if like you can't get a hold of anyone, you're going to have issues one day. And how annoying is that going to be? Like if they're not responding on social, they're probably not going to respond to your emails either. So easy kick.
It is the CrowdStrike example is interesting now that you say it, because like, I don't know what other B2B brands ran in the Super Bowl, right? Like, and it's just like a way to like stand out like a bit more than just like these like random other, you know, B2C brands.
Salesforce and other big companies, and Google's run ads as well.
Yeah, but that's like for like Pixel and like, but yeah, it's Salesforce for sure.
We ran some ads on the analytics team that you might not have seen. There might not be on TV, but targeting to people, showing like analytics in real life. Also, you'll have to check out our AdQuick ad if you haven't seen it, where it's basically a rehab, and we're rehabilitating marketers on out of home, which is like a old channel for some of them.
I'm down. I'll go to the rehab. Give me a spot.
We shot it in like this like rickety like warehouse on the east side of Austin, and it looks exactly like an AA meeting. It's great.
It looked like Fight Club. We built the set and everything. That might be the last ad we ever do before AI just takes over ads. I'm hoping that doesn't happen, because I actually really like to go and, you know, build a set and film something. I think it's fun. I think that's one of the fun parts.
The rickety house sounded fun. I want to go to the next one. OOHAA. There you go.
So Danny, we're getting towards the end. One question I'd like to wrap with is your agency side. I actually started my career on agency side. For young marketers looking to work at an agency like yourself, you know, what's some advice how they can get noticed? I mean, beyond just internships, as like, you know, I'm a junior ad person, I want to get in the door. what are some things that they should be doing, thinking about for their career, for their profile, so they can get noticed like a company like yours?
Well, if you want to work at an agency, don't. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I love working. I love working at my agency. I like working agency side. And I know I'm biased because I'm on there a lot, but I think LinkedIn is an incredible vehicle. It is an incredible vehicle to make your own story, share your own thoughts. I've had people reach out to me in my DMs being like, "Hey, I saw this posting at Noble People. I think that'd be a great." I go, "Great." I forward that to our hiring manager, because that takes initiative. That takes a lot of courage and confidence. I think staying current is obviously important, but I wish someone earlier in my career told me the right things to read. I read so much. We have a segment in my company called Weisman Once Read, which you see what they did there is Wise Man, which I talk about the different things I read, but I read so many different newsletters, but it took me a while to find the right voices. People like Evan Shapiro, Ben Thompson. I really like what the Puck guys are doing. Mobile Dev Memo is another one. And then knowing which like publications are better than others. Brian Morrissey, like so many different people that like I feel like you can learn from. And now, talk about post ZERP, like a lot of these people are putting up paywalls, which, that's the way it is. So you might have to pay up, but that investment is worth it. Like pay the $5 a month. It's, the same as a beer you're going to get at whatever bar you're going to that weekend. So I think reading a lot, knowing who to read. Twitter has also been an unbelievable place to stay current. I think that knowing, I think Chris said it before, like his favorite ad from like the 1950s. Like it's also about knowing as much about history as it is knowing about what's current. I think it's really easy to ask someone who their favorite influencer is today or ad campaign there is today. But I read Ogilvy on Advertising recently, and like that shit holds up.
Yeah,
that shit just holds up. Like
I buy that for people every year. He's got 3 books, I think. I buy all 3 of them.
It's amazing. It's amazing. You read that stuff and you're like, this dude was talking about performance, like direct response. Like this dude knew what was up. So I think in the same way, like knowing who to read today, like knowing some of the past examples, but also past people to learn from. But I think LinkedIn, like all those things, like it's surprising how many inroads you can make with people on LinkedIn and just getting in front of them. Because if you're just cold applying to jobs, you're not going to go very far.
You know what else is a good one? Really quick, Danny, while we're on the topic, Claude Hopkins, Scientific Advertising from, I think the book was published in 1923.
Wow.
OG coupon, direct mailer. Yeah.
Let's do it. We since then we saw a world war, depression and a recession. Wait, I forgot to mention one thing, which is the AdQuick podcast. If you want to join, no.
We do that.
We're preaching to the converted here. If they listen to 47 minutes into the episode,
they have kids. Yeah, exactly.
Well, Danny, we really appreciate your time today. I learned a lot from Danny. Chris, did you as well?
100%.
Well, we will let Danny plug whatever he'd like to plug, and then we will sign off for the day. Danny, the floor is yours.
Okay, first thing I'm going to say, I've been waiting to say it the whole time. Adam looks like Sean Payton. I don't know if you've ever gotten that before, but you look like Denver Broncos coach Sean Payton. So that's the first thing I'll plug. No, I'll plug Noble People, an awesome creative media agency that I work for now. We try to do things differently. We work with all types of clients from a media planning and buying standpoint, and comm strategy as well. So please hit me up if you're interested in unlocking that next phase of growth, which is a dumb thing I say. Are you ready to unlock that next phase of growth? But personally, you can find me on LinkedIn posting about God knows what and some of the stuff that Chris and Adam talked to me about today. I have a newsletter called Let Me Think, have not posted in a while, which is on me, but I am paying Beehive $500 to keep it up. So you can expect to post in the future. And then, in general, just come find me. I'd love to chat, love to talk to people that have stuff to talk about in marketing.
Awesome. The Beehive guys who we've had on this podcast, we predicted their growth.
I love those guys.
A while ago. They're catching more strays. They're just getting promoted on our podcast every other episode because everyone's got a talent.
Those
really?
dudes,
I like those dudes.
Insanely talented. Bravo.
Yeah, but I hit those dudes up and I was like, started a newsletter. I think you could hook me up. Like, nah, they're in it. They want the revenue. I get it. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're testing out their performance newsletter products, and
is it pretty good?
It is cool. It is cool.
Well, Yeah, because it's the CPC.
You notice when we were talking industry influence, you did not say a single ad trade, but you said several individual publishers, that is 100% correct with the research that I've done with people in our industry. Is they trust people, they read the trades, but they would rather hear from individuals, which I think is something that's like more and more common across industries.
I completely agree. Because I didn't talk about like Mike Shield. Like, there's so many more. There's so many. But like, what's interesting is like all these guys were at those places. Like, I think Brian Morrissey was like the editor in chief at Digiday, and like I think Mike Shields either came from there or Adweek. So it's like they also have paywalls too. They're mad expensive. Like, if you're a kid just trying to read, like you're gonna pay whatever it is. I think it's like really expensive to have Digiday. It's like $50 a month. Like, you're not gonna read that. Like, it's just not happening. So I'm sorry. I know I can go on forever with you guys. We'll do hour 2 next time. Yeah.
No worries. Well, for everyone who is listening via Spotify or Apple or another podcast app, please feel free to link this to your friends. And again, I'm still doing the YouTuber thing. If you're watching on YouTube, like, comment, and subscribe. I can't give you $10,000 like Mr. Beast, but I can give you a high five. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we will be back next week with another episode.